Hazel lifted the Alpha King's dinner plate and her breath caught. Folded beneath it, precise as a military order, was parchment with her real name, not the number they'd branded her with. Inside, Beta Harrison is going to kill you. I have proof. Meet me at midnight, Eastern Chapel. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. This is not a request. This is your only chance to survive what's coming. I should have protected you 3 years ago. Let me fix that now. It was signed King Maximus Ravenclaw, the king who'd never acknowledged her existence. The king whose trusted Beta Harrison controlled every Omega in the fortress with threats and violence. The king who apparently knew she was about to die. She had 12 hours. 12 hours to decide if this was salvation or the most elaborate execution she'd ever seen. If you believe everyone deserves to be seen, no matter their rank, hit subscribe right now. Because this story is about breaking the chains that people like Beta Harrison, the man who profits from keeping Omegas invisible, want to keep locked tight. Only those who support the broken system won't subscribe. Don't be one of them. Chapter 1. 3 years ago, Hazel's parents sold her to the Shadowmoon Pack for 200 silver coins and a promise that she'd have food and shelter. They didn't mention she'd be wearing a collar. They didn't mention she'd lose her name and become Servant 47. They didn't mention that Omegas in the capital were 1 step above slaves and 2 steps below dirt. The Ravenclaw fortress rose from black stone, 7 stories of ancient power built into the mountain itself. Torches burned eternal in iron sconces. Banners of silver and crimson hung from vaulted ceilings. This was where the strongest pack in the realm made its home, where Alpha King Maximus Ravenclaw ruled with absolute authority over 12 territories and 300,000 wolves. Hazel was 22 years old, though she felt 40. Her dark brown skin carried scars from kitchen burns and rough stone floors. Her black hair, once long and wild, was now cropped short because Beta Harrison, the king's second-in-command, said long hair on Omegas was a vanity they hadn't earned. Her wolf had gone quiet 2 years ago, retreating so deep inside her that some days Hazel forgot she was anything more than human. Beta Harrison Greaves was a man who smiled with too many teeth. 40 years old, barrel-chested, with gray streaking through his brown hair and eyes like chips of flint. He ran the servant quarters with an iron fist wrapped in velvet threats. He decided who ate and who went hungry. Who got warm blankets and who shivered through winter. Who stayed and who disappeared into the northern work camps where Omegas were sent to mine silver until their bodies gave out. He also skimmed money from the servant budgets, sold Omega labor to noble houses for personal profit, and arranged marriages between Omega girls and merchants who paid well for young wives who couldn't say no. Everyone knew. No one spoke. Speaking meant vanishing. Hazel had learned to be invisible. Head down, mouth shut, hands working. She cleaned the throne room before dawn. She served breakfast in the lesser halls where visiting alphas and betas ate. She scrubbed pots in the kitchen. She polished armor in the guard quarters. She hauled water from the wells. She existed in the spaces between notice, a ghost in gray who did her work and disappeared. The Alpha King was a legend she saw from a distance. Maximus Ravenclaw stood 6'4", broad-shouldered and wolf-lean, with black hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes the color of amber in sunlight. He was 30 years old and had held the throne since he was 22, when his father died in the border wars. They said he could shift faster than thought, that his wolf was black as midnight and twice as deadly, that he'd killed 50 enemies with his bare hands before he was 25. They also said he was cold. Emotionless. That he ruled with logic instead of heart, strategy instead of mercy. That he'd never taken a mate because he believed love made kings weak. That he barely spoke except to give orders, and those orders were always obeyed because disobedience meant death. Hazel had served his meals 100 times. She'd cleaned his private study when he was away on campaigns. She'd washed blood from his training clothes after he spent hours in the sparring ring. He had never looked at her. Not once. His amber eyes passed over her like she was furniture. She told herself it was better this way. Better to be invisible than to be noticed by someone with that much power. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late autumn, and the fortress was preparing for the gathering, a week-long event where allied packs came to renew treaties and arrange alliances. The halls buzzed with tension. Extra servants were brought in from the lower city. Beta Harrison stalked the corridors barking orders and backhanding anyone who moved too slow. Hazel was assigned to the Alpha King's private study, a room few servants ever entered. It was on the 5th floor, accessible only by a spiral staircase that climbed through the mountain's heart. The study was all dark wood and leather, shelves lined with books in languages Hazel didn't recognize, maps spread across a massive oak desk, a fireplace that burned low and steady. She was told to deliver the king's evening meal and leave immediately. Do not linger. Do not touch anything. Do not look at him if he's present. Maximus wasn't there when she entered. The room smelled like smoke and pine and something else, something wild that made her wolf stir for the first time in months. She set the tray on the desk, silver plate covered with venison and roasted vegetables, a goblet of red wine, a small loaf of bread still warm from the oven. She should have left. Her instructions were clear. But her eyes caught on the map spread across the desk, marked with red ink showing troop movements and territory borders. She saw her old village marked there, a tiny dot on the eastern edge of Shadowmoon lands. Her fingers brushed the parchment without thinking. I didn't realize Servant 47 could read maps. The voice came from behind her, low and precise. Hazel's heart stopped. She spun around, dropping into a bow so fast her knees cracked against the floor. Alpha King Maximus Ravenclaw stood in the doorway, still wearing his training leathers, sweat dampening his hair. His amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her wolf whimper. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I was leaving. I didn't mean. You were looking at your homeland. He moved into the room with the fluid grace of a predator. The village of Thornhollow. Burned during the border wars. Rebuilt 3 years ago. She kept her head down, her heart hammering. How did he know where she was from? How did he even know she existed? Stand up. She obeyed, though her legs shook. He was close now, close enough that she could smell leather and smoke and that wild scent that made her wolf press against her consciousness. You have kind eyes, he said quietly, and the words were so unexpected that she looked up without thinking. Big mistake. His gaze locked onto hers, amber meeting dark brown, and something passed between them that felt like lightning. He stepped back abruptly. Leave. She fled, her pulse racing, her mind spinning. She made it to the servants' quarters and collapsed on her cot, telling herself she'd imagined the whole thing. Kings didn't notice omegas. Kings didn't compliment servants. Kings didn't look at girls like her as if they were seeing something that mattered. It was impossible. 2 days later, she was cleaning the throne room when Beta Harrison cornered her by the eastern corridor. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. Servant 47, I hear you were alone in the king's study. I delivered his meal as ordered, Beta Harrison. And did you touch anything you weren't supposed to touch? No, sir. His hand shot out, gripping her chin hard enough to bruise. If I find out you've been stealing, if I find out you've been snooping where you don't belong, I'll have you sent north. Do you understand? Yes, sir. He released her, his eyes cold. Good. Because omegas who get ideas above their station don't last long in this fortress. Remember your place. She remembered. She stayed invisible. She worked her shifts and kept her head down and told herself that whatever had happened in that study was meaningless. But then came the third night. The night she was assigned to clear the Alpha King's dinner tray from his private study. The night she found the note. Beta Harrison wants omegas like Hazel to stay invisible forever because that's how he maintains power and profits from their suffering. If you believe people like him should be held accountable, drop a comment saying everyone deserves to be seen. Only those who benefit from broken systems will stay silent. Which side are you on? Chapter 2. The note was folded with military precision, creased exactly 3 times, the edges sharp enough to cut. On the outside, written in elegant script that shimmered faintly in the firelight, was a single word, Hazel. Not Servant 47. Not Omega. Her real name, written by a hand that had commanded armies. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. The handwriting inside was the same, precise and controlled, but the words made her knees weak. You are not invisible. You have never been invisible. I see you every day, and I know what Harrison does. The laundry alcove behind the Eastern Chapel. Tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. Tell no one. If you don't come, I'll understand. But if you want the truth, if you want to know why a king would notice an Omega, meet me there. Burn this after reading. Imar. Hazel's wolf surged forward for the first time in years, alert and awake and howling with something that felt like hope and terror mixed together. This was impossible. Kings didn't write notes to servants. Kings didn't arrange secret meetings. Kings didn't put themselves at risk for Omegas who meant nothing. And yet the note was real, the handwriting unmistakable. She'd seen his signature on proclamations posted in the servants' hall. This was his hand. His words. His invitation. Or it was a trap. Beta Harrison's warning echoed in her mind, Omegas who get ideas above their station don't last long. What if this was a test? What if Harrison had forged the note to catch her breaking rules? What if she showed up at midnight and found guards waiting instead of the king? She should burn the note and forget it existed. She should stay in her place and survive. But something in her chest had cracked open, something that had been sealed tight for 3 years. The part of her that remembered being more than a servant, more than a number, more than a shadow. The part that remembered being Hazel, daughter of hunters, girl who used to run through forests and dream of finding her mate someday. She held the note over the candle flame until it caught fire, watching the parchment curl and blacken. The shimmer in the ink flared bright blue before disappearing into ash. Tomorrow at midnight. The laundry alcove. Come alone. She had 24 hours to decide if she wanted to risk everything for the truth. The next day crawled by. Hazel scrubbed floors and served meals and hauled water, all while her mind spun with possibilities. She watched Beta Harrison bark orders at a young Omega boy who dropped a tray, his hand striking fast and casual, and she thought about the note, I know what Harrison does. What did that mean? That the king knew about the skimming? The bribes? The Omega girls sent to merchants? If he knew, why didn't he stop it? He was the Alpha King. His word was law. One command and Harrison would be finished. Unless the king needed proof. Unless Harrison was too entrenched, too connected to the noble betas who supported the throne. Unless removing him required careful strategy, not just royal authority. Or unless this was all a fantasy she was constructing to justify walking into danger. At dinner, she served the lesser hall where visiting alphas ate. She overheard their conversations, talk of border disputes and trade agreements and the upcoming gathering. One of them mentioned the king's refusal to take a mate. He's 30 years old, a gray-haired alpha said, stabbing his meat with a knife. The throne needs an heir. He needs a Luna. He says he'll choose when the time is right, another replied. But I think he's incapable of it. They say his wolf is too dominant, too cold. That he can't form the mate bond because he has no heart. Then the Ravenclaw line ends with him. What a waste. Hazel cleared their plates and said nothing. But her wolf growled low in her chest, offended on behalf of a king she barely knew. Midnight approached. She finished her last shift, returned to the servants' quarters, and waited until the other Omegas were asleep. Then she slipped out, moving through the fortress like the ghost she'd learned to be. The eastern chapel was old, built before the current fortress, a small stone building with stained glass windows that depicted the moon goddess in her various forms. The laundry alcove was tucked behind it, a narrow space where servants hung clothes to dry during the day. It was empty now, dark except for moonlight filtering through the trees. Hazel waited, her heart pounding, her wolf pacing nervously. Then he stepped from the shadows. Alpha King Maximus Ravenclaw wore simple dark clothes, no crown, no armor, nothing to mark him as royalty. But power radiated from him like heat, undeniable and absolute. His amber eyes found hers in the darkness. You came. I shouldn't have. But you did. He stayed where he was, giving her space. I know you're afraid. I know this doesn't make sense. But I need you to listen, and then you can decide what to do. Why me? The words burst out before she could stop them. I'm nobody. I'm an Omega servant you've never even looked at. I've looked at you every day for 3 years. Silence. The admission hung between them like something physical. You don't remember, he continued quietly, but we met once before. 6 years ago, in Thornhollow. I was still a prince then, visiting the Eastern Territories with my father. You were 16, working in the village healer's house. You gave me water when I was separated from my guard, and you didn't know who I was. Hazel's mind raced back. 6 years ago. Before her parents sold her. Before the collar. She'd worked for the village healer for 2 years, learning herbs and wound care. She remembered a young man coming to the door, travel-worn and thirsty, asking for water. She'd given him a cup and bandaged a cut on his hand. He'd thanked her and left. That was you? You told me your name was Hazel, and that you wanted to be a healer someday. You had kind eyes, and you smiled when you talked about helping people. His voice softened. 3 years ago, when you arrived at the fortress in chains, I recognized you immediately. And I've watched you survive what would break most people. Then why didn't you help me? Why didn't you stop Harrison? Why did you let me suffer if you knew? Because Harrison has connections to 12 noble families who fund the crown's military. Because removing him without proof of his corruption would cause a political crisis that could fracture the realm. Because I needed time to gather evidence and allies. His jaw tightened. And because I'm a coward who let strategy come before doing what was right. Hazel stared at him. Alpha Kings didn't call themselves cowards. Alpha Kings didn't apologize to Omegas. Alpha Kings didn't risk secret meetings to explain themselves. I'd been building a case against Harrison for 2 years, Maximus continued. Next week, during the gathering, I'm going to arrest him in front of the allied packs. I have testimonies from 30 Omegas he's abused, financial records proving his theft, and evidence of his trafficking operation. He'll be executed, and the reforms I've been planning will be implemented. Why are you telling me this? He moved closer, and she caught that wild scent again, stronger now. His wolf was close to the surface, barely controlled. Because you're the one who inspired it. Because watching you survive with dignity, watching you help other servants even when you had nothing, watching you be kind in a place designed to break kindness, it reminded me what leadership should be. Not cold strategy. Not emotionless rule. But strength used to protect those who can't protect themselves. Her wolf was howling now, pressing against her skin, desperate to emerge. And suddenly Hazel understood what the scent was, why her wolf responded to him like this. She couldn't finish the sentence. Mates, he said quietly. I knew the moment I saw you again 3 years ago. But you were an Omega in chains, and I was a king who couldn't claim you without starting a war with the nobles who keep the peace. So I waited. I planned. And I watched you from a distance like a coward. You're not a coward. I let you suffer for 3 years. You're trying to change the system. That takes time. Time you spent in pain. His control cracked, just for a moment, and she saw the anguish beneath. I'm telling you this now because next week everything changes. Harrison will be gone. The reforms will pass. And I want to offer you a choice. What choice? Stay in the fortress as a free Omega with a position in the healing house, I remember your dream. Or leave, go anywhere you want, and I'll make sure you have the resources to build whatever life you choose. He paused. Or stay as my mate, my Luna, and help me rebuild this kingdom into something that treats people with the dignity you've always shown. Hazel's mind reeled. This was too much. Too impossible. She was a servant, a nobody, an Omega who'd spent 3 years invisible. She couldn't be a Luna. She couldn't be a queen. Could she? I know it's overwhelming, Maximus said. I know you need time. That's why I'm telling you a week before it happens. Think about it. Decide what you want. Whatever you choose, you'll be free. You'll be safe. And you'll never be invisible again. Harrison can't know about this. If he suspects, he won't. I've been careful. But even as he said it, Hazel heard footsteps. Multiple sets, moving fast. Maximus heard them too. His body went rigid, his wolf surging forward. Run, he commanded. What? Run. Now. Then Beta Harrison stepped into the moonlight, flanked by 4 guards, and he was smiling like a wolf who'd cornered prey. Your Majesty. What a surprise to find you here. With Servant 47. Alone. In the middle of the night. Harrison just caught them in the worst possible position. If you're standing against corruption and those who manipulate systems for power, hit that like button. Because silence is exactly what Beta Harrison counts on. Don't give him that satisfaction. Chapter 3. Beta Harrison's smile was poisonous. I received a report that Servant 47 was sneaking through the fortress after curfew. Naturally, I came to investigate. Imagine my shock at finding her conspiring with your Majesty in a secret location. The 4 guards spread out, blocking exit routes. They were Harrison's men, hand-picked loyalists who'd helped him run his schemes for years. Their hands rested on sword hilts, ready but not yet drawn. They wouldn't attack their king openly, but the threat was clear. Maximus's voice turned to ice. You forget yourself, Beta Harrison. I don't answer to you. Of course not, Your Majesty. But the noble council might be concerned if rumors spread that you've been meeting secretly with an Omega servant. Especially with the gathering starting in 5 days. Harrison's tone was respectful, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. You know how fragile political alliances can be. How quickly trust can erode when a king's judgment appears compromised. Hazel's stomach dropped. This was the trap. Harrison had probably been watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Maybe he'd seen her take the note. Maybe he'd been following her. It didn't matter. He had them now. You overstep your bounds, Maximus said, his wolf flashing behind his eyes. The guards shifted nervously. Even Harrison's confidence faltered for a moment when faced with the full force of the Alpha King's dominance. But Harrison recovered quickly. I serve the crown by protecting its reputation. If you were meeting Servant 47 for innocent reasons, simply explain and I'll ensure no rumors spread. But if you refuse to explain... He spread his hands. Well. The noble families already whisper that you're incapable of forming proper bonds. That your refusal to take a mate makes you weak. If they think you're sneaking around with Omega servants instead of choosing a suitable Luna from the noble bloodlines, they might question your fitness to rule. It was a masterful political move. Harrison couldn't attack the king directly, but he could threaten to undermine the fragile coalition that kept the realm together. The nobles tolerated Maximus's refusal to mate because he was strong, effective, and maintained stability. But if they thought he was distracted by an inappropriate relationship with a servant, they might withdraw support. And without the noble houses, the king's power became theoretical rather than practical. Maximus's jaw tightened. Servant 47 came to deliver a message about security concerns in the servant quarters. We met here to discuss it privately. At midnight? In secret? Harrison's smile widened. Your Majesty, if there were security concerns, surely you would have summoned her to your office. Unless the nature of these concerns required special discretion. The implication was clear and dirty. Harrison was suggesting something inappropriate, something that would humiliate both the king and Hazel while giving him leverage. Careful, Harrison, Maximus said softly, but his voice carried enough menace to make the guards take a step back. Accusations against your king can be considered treason. I make no accusations, Your Majesty. I simply seek to understand the situation so I can protect the crown's interests. Perhaps Servant 47 can explain? Harrison's gaze slid to Hazel, predatory and cruel. What message were you delivering that required a midnight meeting? Hazel's mind raced. If she said the wrong thing, Harrison would twist it. If she stayed silent, he'd claim she was hiding something. There was no right answer. I was concerned about. She reported theft, Maximus interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Someone has been stealing from the servant quarter budgets. She brought me documentation. We met here because she feared retaliation from whoever is responsible. Brilliant. He'd flipped it on Harrison without directly accusing him. If Harrison pushed further, he'd be drawing attention to the very corruption Maximus was gathering evidence about. Harrison's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went flat and cold. Theft? How troubling. I oversee the servant budgets personally. I assure you, everything is accounted for. Then you won't mind a formal audit. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Harrison's fingers twitched toward his sword, an instinctive reaction he barely suppressed. The guards looked between their beta and their king, uncertain. Of course not, Your Majesty, Harrison finally said. I welcome any investigation. My books are always open to the crown. Excellent. I'll have the royal accountants begin tomorrow. Maximus turned to Hazel, his expression controlled but his eyes conveying a warning, play along. Servant 47, return to your quarters. I'll ensure your safety. Harrison, we'll continue this discussion in my office. Harrison bowed, his smile fixed. As you command. Hazel fled, her heart pounding. Behind her, she heard Maximus's low voice speaking to Harrison, too quiet to make out words. She didn't stop until she reached the servants' quarters and collapsed on her cot, shaking. The other Omegas were asleep, unaware. But across the room, Hazel caught movement. Another servant, a girl named Iris who'd been at the fortress for 5 years, was watching her with wide eyes. She'd been awake. She'd seen Hazel come in late, disheveled and terrified. Their gazes met. Iris didn't say anything, but her expression was clear, she knew something had happened. And in a place like this, knowledge was dangerous. Hazel pulled her thin blanket over her head and tried to breathe. Everything was falling apart. Harrison knew about the meeting. He didn't have proof of what was actually discussed, but he had enough to start rumors, enough to make Maximus's position precarious. And if Maximus moved against him now, it would look like a king silencing someone who'd discovered an inappropriate relationship. The reforms would be delayed. Harrison would survive. And Hazel would disappear into the northern work camps or worse. She'd destroyed everything. At dawn, Hazel reported to the kitchen for her morning shift, exhausted and terrified. The head cook, an older beta woman named Margaret, took one look at her and frowned. You look like death. You sick? Just tired. Well, tired or not, you've been reassigned. Beta Harrison's orders. You're working the royal wing now. Direct service to the king's quarters. Hazel's blood went cold. What? Starting today. Report to the 5th floor. His Majesty takes breakfast at 7. This was Harrison's move. Put her in close proximity to the king, give credibility to his insinuations, manufacture opportunities to catch them together. If anyone saw her entering Maximus's private chambers regularly, the rumors would spread like wildfire. She couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. She couldn't explain without revealing the truth. She was trapped. The 5th floor was quieter than the lower levels, reserved for the king and his closest advisors. Hazel climbed the spiral stairs with a breakfast tray, her hand steady through sheer force of will. When she reached the study, she knocked softly. Enter. Maximus sat at his desk, papers spread before him. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. When he saw her, his expression tightened. Harrison's work? He reassigned me this morning. Of course he did. Maximus stood, moving to the window. He's putting pressure on both of us. Making it impossible to meet without fueling suspicion, while keeping you close enough that any interaction looks inappropriate. What do? We stick to the plan. The gathering starts in 4 days. I've moved up the audit. My accountants are going through Harrison's records today. If we're lucky, we'll have enough evidence to arrest him before the Allied Alphas arrive. And if we're not lucky? He turned to face her, and the weight of leadership sat heavy on his shoulders. Then we wait. We play our parts. And we endure 4 more days of his games. I can handle that. Can you? His gaze softened. Hazel, if this becomes too dangerous, I need you to tell me. I won't let you be sacrificed for politics. You're the one who's been planning this for 2 years. I'm not going to be the reason it fails. Something flickered in his eyes, pride, perhaps, or admiration. You're stronger than most alphas I know. I'm an Omega who's been surviving Harrison for 3 years. That requires a different kind of strength. A knock interrupted them. Maximus's expression went neutral. Enter. The door opened to reveal one of Harrison's guards, the same one from last night. His gaze flicked between them, assessing. Your Majesty, Beta Harrison requests your presence in the council chamber. Urgent matter regarding the gathering preparations. Tell him I'll be there shortly. The guard bowed and left, but his eyes lingered on Hazel long enough to make his intentions clear. He was watching. Reporting. Building Harrison's case piece by piece. You should go, Maximus said quietly. And Hazel? Whatever happens in the next 4 days, remember, you're not invisible anymore. Not to me. Not to anyone. That makes you both powerful and vulnerable. She left with those words echoing in her mind. Not invisible anymore. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like being pinned beneath a spotlight with predators circling in the dark. For 3 years, invisibility had kept her safe. Now visibility might get her killed. And the worst part was, she wouldn't change it. Because for the first time since her parents sold her, someone saw her. Someone knew her name. Someone believed she mattered. Even if it destroyed them both, that was worth fighting for. Beta Harrison is counting on fear to keep people silent. He wants Hazel isolated and powerless. If you believe bullies like him should never win, comment I stand with the voiceless. Because your engagement is proof that people are watching, and tyrants fear nothing more than being exposed. Chapter 4. The royal accountants finished their audit in 48 hours. They found discrepancies totaling 16,000 silver coins over 3 years, plus documentation of 12 Omega girls sold to merchants, plus evidence of forced labor contracts that violated kingdom law. It was enough to execute Harrison 3 times over. But there was a problem. The records have been altered, the head accountant explained to Maximus in a private meeting Hazel overheard while cleaning the adjacent chamber. Recently. Within the last week. Someone with access to the archives went through and changed dates, amounts, signatures. It's still evidence of corruption, but now Harrison can claim the forgeries were done by someone trying to frame him. Who had access to alter the records? Maximus asked, his voice deadly calm. Only Beta Harrison himself, and... The accountant hesitated. And you, Your Majesty. The king always has full archive access. Silence. Then Maximus laughed, a sound without humor. Clever. He's positioned it so that if I push forward with charges, he can claim I fabricated evidence because of a personal vendetta. Because of rumors about my involvement with an Omega servant. The timing is suspicious, Your Majesty. If you accuse him now, the noble families will question your motives. Especially with the gathering starting tomorrow. Then we wait. But Your Majesty. We wait, Maximus repeated, steel in his voice. Let him think he's won. Let him get comfortable. We'll find another way. Hazel finished her task and slipped away before they noticed her. Her mind spun with the implications. Harrison had outmaneuvered them. He'd used their own evidence against them, turned it into a weapon that made Maximus look corrupt instead. And the gathering, the week when dozens of allied packs descended on the fortress to renew treaties and witness the Alpha King's strength, was the worst possible time for political instability. If Maximus appeared compromised, if the nobles thought his judgment was clouded by an inappropriate relationship, they could withdraw support. Challenge his authority. Demand his abdication. The realm could fracture into civil war. All because of her. That night, Hazel couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot in the servants' quarters, listening to other Omegas breathe, and made a decision. She would leave. If she disappeared, the rumors would lose their foundation. Harrison would have no leverage. Maximus could rule without distraction. The reforms could still happen, just more slowly, more carefully. Without her as ammunition, Harrison's power would eventually crumble. It was the logical choice. The selfless choice. The choice that hurt like silver through the heart. At midnight, she packed her few possessions, a spare dress, the worn boots her mother had given her 6 years ago, a small knife for protection. She left the gray Omega collar on her cot, a symbol she was done being owned. The fortress was quiet as she moved through the halls, avoiding guard patrols she'd memorized over 3 years. She made it to the eastern gate, where a small servant's exit led to the mountain paths. Running away? That's not like you. Hazel spun. Iris stepped from the shadows, her expression unreadable. The other Omega had been watching her, following her, waiting. I'm leaving before I cause more damage, Hazel said quietly. You think disappearing will fix this? It won't. Harrison will just claim you fled because you were caught doing something shameful with the king. The rumors will be worse. Then what am I supposed to do? Iris moved closer. I've been here 5 years. I've watched Harrison destroy dozens of Omegas. But I've also watched you, the way you help others, the way you survive with dignity. 3 nights ago, I saw you come back from wherever you were, terrified and shaking. And today I heard the servants talking. They say the king has been kind to you. They say Harrison is furious about it. It's not what they think. I know. Iris smiled sadly. Because if it was what they think, you'd be acting guilty. Instead, you're trying to protect the king by leaving. That tells me whatever's happening between you two is real. And that's dangerous. But it's also rare. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to stop trying to be invisible again. You taught me something, that surviving isn't enough. That dignity matters even when they try to strip it away. Iris's voice strengthened. Harrison has controlled us by making us believe we're powerless. But you have something he can't take away, you have the king's loyalty. Use it. Fight back. Because if you run, the rest of us lose hope. I'm not a hero. No. You're better. You're a survivor who refuses to become cruel. Iris stepped back. The gathering starts tomorrow. Alphas from 12 territories will be watching. If you're going to make a stand, that's when to do it. When Harrison can't silence you without witnesses. He'll kill me. Maybe. But maybe you'll kill him first. Iris disappeared into the shadows, leaving Hazel alone with her choice. Leave and let Harrison win. Or stay and risk everything for a chance at something better. She thought about Maximus saying she had kind eyes. She thought about the other Omegas who looked to her for small kindnesses. She thought about her wolf, finally awake after 2 years of silence, howling for her to fight. She walked back into the fortress. The gathering began the next day with ceremonies and feasts. Alphas arrived from across the realm, the Ironwood Pack from the north, the Silverpine Pack from the west, the Bloodmoon Pack from the south. Each brought their entourages, their warriors, their political agendas. The fortress swelled with hundreds of visiting wolves, all watching the Alpha King for signs of weakness. Hazel worked the royal wing, serving meals and cleaning chambers, while Harrison positioned himself as the perfect second-in-command. He greeted visiting Alphas warmly. He organized events with flawless precision. He played the role of loyal beta who kept the kingdom running while the king dealt with larger matters. And he watched Hazel constantly, his smile growing wider each time their paths crossed. On the third day of the gathering, during a formal dinner in the Great Hall, Harrison made his move. The hall was packed with alphas and their companions, long tables laden with food, wine flowing freely. Maximus sat at the head table with the most powerful alphas, Lord Garrett of Ironwood, Lady Sienna of Silverpine, Commander Kane of Bloodmoon. Harrison stood behind the king's chair, the picture of subordinate devotion. Hazel was serving wine when it happened. She approached the head table with a fresh bottle, trying to be invisible again despite Iris's words. But Harrison's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist as she poured. Your Majesty, have you noticed that Servant 47 has been assigned exclusively to your personal quarters for the past 4 days? The hall didn't go silent, that would have been too obvious. But conversations dimmed. Attention shifted. Wolves had excellent hearing. Maximus's expression didn't change. I haven't paid attention to servant assignments, Harrison. That's your responsibility. Indeed. I assigned her there myself. Harrison's grip on Hazel's wrist tightened. Because I wanted to keep her close. You see, I've been investigating the theft reports she allegedly brought to your attention. And I discovered something troubling. Release her wrist. Harrison ignored the command. The documentation she provided was falsified. The handwriting doesn't match any servant in the quarters. The dates contradict guard logs. In fact, the only person with access to create such convincing forgeries would be someone with extensive knowledge of royal record-keeping. Your point? Maximus's voice was dangerously soft. My point is that Servant 47 has been manipulating your Majesty. Feeding false information to gain private access. Exploiting your kindness for personal advancement. Harrison released Hazel's wrist and bowed. I apologize for not catching this sooner. But now, in front of our esteemed guests, I must formally accuse Servant 47 of conspiracy against the crown. The hall went completely silent now. Every eye fixed on the head table. This was a show trial, a political execution dressed as justice. Lord Garrett leaned forward, his gray beard bristling. That's a serious accusation, Beta Harrison. What evidence do you have beyond circumstantial suspicion? I have the forged documents. I have testimony from guards who witnessed secret meetings between the king and this Omega. I have. You have nothing, Maximus said, standing. His wolf pressed against his skin, making the air shimmer with power. Nothing but conspiracy theories built on jealousy and corruption. Your Majesty. You want to talk about evidence? Let's talk about evidence. Maximus gestured to the hall guards. Bring in the witnesses. The doors opened. 30 Omegas filed in, men and women Harrison had abused over the years. They wore their gray collars, but their heads were high. Behind them came Margaret the head cook, carrying a leather-bound ledger. Hazel's heart stopped. Maximus had been planning this. Waiting for Harrison to overreach in front of witnesses. Using the gathering as a stage for justice. These Omegas will testify to your abuses, Maximus continued, his voice carrying through the hall. Margaret has kept her own financial records, independent of your doctored books. And the royal accountants have verified that 16,000 silver coins are missing from servant budgets over 3 years. Now, you want to accuse an innocent Omega of conspiracy? In front of allied alphas? Be my guest. But when this is done, we're going to talk about your crimes. Harrison's face went white, then red. His hand moved to his sword. Draw that blade, Maximus said softly, and I'll have the legal justification to execute you immediately for threatening your king. Is that what you want? The moment stretched. Harrison's hand trembled on the sword hilt. Around the hall, visiting alphas watched with predatory interest. This was better than any entertainment, a beta being destroyed by his own trap. Harrison released the sword. His smile returned, but it was cracked at the edges. Your Majesty, I see I've been misinformed. Please forgive my zealousness in protecting the crown. If I've been too harsh on Servant 47, I apologize. Too late. Maximus turned to Lord Garrett. By the laws of pack justice, witnessed by the allied alphas, I formally strip Beta Harrison Greaves of his rank and title. He'll stand trial for corruption, abuse of power, and trafficking. If found guilty, the sentence is death. Harrison's mask shattered. You'll regret this. The noble families won't tolerate. The noble families, Lady Sienna interrupted, her voice crisp, will tolerate justice. Continue, Your Majesty. Guards moved forward to take Harrison into custody. He fought, of course. His wolf burst through, a brown-gray creature bristling with rage. But Maximus was faster. His black wolf emerged in a blur of darkness and power, slamming Harrison to the ground with a snarl that shook the rafters. It was over in seconds. Harrison lay pinned, his wolf's throat in Maximus's jaws, submission or death. He chose submission. They dragged him from the hall in chains. And Hazel stood there, wine bottle still in her hand, watching the man who'd controlled her life for 3 years disappear through the doors like he'd never mattered at all. Harrison fell because people found their voices. Because someone stood up even when it was terrifying. If you believe courage is contagious and that speaking up matters, hit subscribe. Because channels like this stand for truth, and only those who profit from silence will scroll past without engaging. Chapter 5. The trial lasted 2 days. Harrison was found guilty on all counts. They executed him at dawn on the 3rd day, in the courtyard where Omegas had scrubbed floors for decades. 30 Omegas who'd suffered under his rule were given the option to witness. Hazel went. She needed to see it end. The blade fell clean. Harrison's wolf died without dignity, just like he'd lived. Afterward, Maximus announced the reforms. All gray Omega collars were abolished. Forced servitude was outlawed. A new system would be implemented where Omegas could choose their work and earn fair wages. An oversight council, including Omega representatives, would prevent future abuse. The noble families grumbled but accepted it. The allied alphas, impressed by Maximus's handling of the Harrison situation, threw their support behind the reforms. Change came slower than Hazel wanted, but it came. A week after the execution, Maximus summoned her to his study. She climbed the spiral stairs for what felt like the 100th time, but this time she wasn't wearing a collar. This time she knocked as an equal. Come in. He stood by the window, looking out at the mountain forests. When he turned, his expression was careful, controlled. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I put you in danger. I let my personal feelings complicate your safety. I should have." "Don't." Hazel crossed the room. "Don't apologize for seeing me. Don't apologize for planning justice. You did what you could with the constraints you had. It wasn't enough. It was everything." She stopped a few feet away, giving him space. "You asked me to make a choice. About staying, leaving, or being your Luna. I've had time to think about it." His wolf surged behind his eyes, hopeful and terrified at once. "And? I'm not ready to be your Luna." The hope dimmed, but he nodded. "I understand. You don't, actually. Let me finish." Hazel took a breath. "For 3 years, I was invisible. Then you made me visible, which was terrifying and wonderful. But I went from being nobody's property to potentially being the king's mate, and I never got to just be Hazel. Just myself. No collar, no title, just me. What do you need?" "Time. Freedom. A chance to figure out who I am when I'm not surviving." She met his amber eyes. "You said I wanted to be a healer." "That's still true. So I want to train. Study. Work in the healing house. Learn who I am as a free Omega before I become anyone's Luna." "And us?" His voice was quiet. "The mate bond?" "The mate bond isn't going anywhere. It'll wait." She smiled. "And so will you, if you mean what you said about choosing me." Something shifted in his expression, relief mixed with respect. "How long?" "A year. Maybe 2. However long it takes for me to stop feeling like I need you to define me." She stepped closer. "Because when I become your Luna, if I become your Luna, I want it to be because I choose you, not because I need you. There's a difference." He closed the distance between them, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted his reputation. "You're stronger than I deserve. I'm exactly as strong as I need to be. And you're more than the cold king everyone thinks you are. Will you let me court you? Properly? While you're training? Court me like a free Omega, not like a subject. No power imbalance. No politics. Just you and me figuring out if we work when Harrison's not forcing us together through trauma. I can do that." "Good." She pulled back slightly. "Also, I'm keeping my own quarters in the healing house. No moving into the royal wing until I'm ready. And I'm not sitting at the head table during formal dinners. I'm not ready for that scrutiny." "Anything else?" "Yes. Stop looking at me like I'm going to disappear. I'm not invisible anymore, remember? I'm here. I'm choosing to be here. That's not going to change just because I'm taking my time." He laughed, and it was the first genuinely happy sound she'd heard from him. "You're going to be a terrifying Luna. Only to people who deserve it." 2 years later, during the spring gathering, Alpha King Maximus Ravenclaw married Hazel in a ceremony witnessed by 12 allied packs. She wore silver and blue, the colors of the moon goddess, and a crown of mountain flowers instead of gold. Her Omega heritage was acknowledged, celebrated even, as proof that strength came in many forms. In her wedding vows, she promised to be a Luna who remembered being invisible. Who would use visibility to protect those who couldn't protect themselves? Who would build a kingdom where Omegas were healed, not just by medicine, but by dignity? Maximus promised to be a king worthy of a queen who chose herself first. The healing house where Hazel had trained for 2 years was renamed the Haven, and it became a center for Omega education throughout the realm. Former servants became healers, teachers, administrators. The gray collars melted down and recast into bells that rang each morning to remind everyone that freedom required constant vigilance. Iris, the Omega who'd convinced Hazel to stay and fight, became the head administrator of the Haven. Margaret the cook opened a training program for culinary omegas. The 30 witnesses who'd testified against Harrison each found their own paths, supported by a system that finally valued them. And on quiet nights, when the kingdom slept, Luna Hazel would walk through the fortress halls she'd once scrubbed as a servant. Sometimes she'd stop in the servants' quarters, now renovated into proper housing with fair wages and dignity. Sometimes she'd visit the Eastern Chapel where everything had changed. But always, she'd end at the healing house, where new Omegas arrived seeking safety and training. She'd greet them by name, never by number, and tell them the same thing. You're not invisible. You've never been invisible. And now the kingdom will see you, because I'm going to make damn sure they look. Alpha King Maximus Ravenclaw had noticed an Omega servant and changed his kingdom for her. But in the end, Luna Hazel had changed herself first, and that made all the difference. The note hidden beneath a plate had started everything. But the choice to be visible, to fight back, to demand dignity, that's what finished it. And somewhere in the fortress archives, preserved under glass, that original note remained. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful revolutions start with someone simply writing your name and seeing you as human. Beta Harrison represented every system that keeps people invisible and powerless. This story ended with his defeat because people chose to be seen and to fight back. If you believe everyone deserves dignity regardless of their rank or status, hit subscribe and drop a comment saying I stand for justice. This channel tells stories about people who refuse to stay invisible, and your engagement helps those stories reach others who need to hear them. Don't let silence win.